Welcome everyone to Voice Project's webinar on Above and Beyond, Leading in a Time of Crisis and Complexity. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Langford. I'm the Director of Voice Project. I hope you're all staying well. Thanks for sharing your time today. I have no doubt you will leave with some insights and inspiration. In recognition of this being National Reconciliation Week, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. In a moment, I'll hand over to my colleague, Dr. Louise Parkes, who will introduce our speaker, Mike Baird. It's a real privilege to have Mike join us today. Many of you will know Mike as past New South Wales Premier, but more recently, he's taken the role of CEO of HammondCare. We're hearing from Mike and HammondCare today because they are an enterprise-level winner of one of our Change Champion Awards. But first, let me take just a minute to introduce Voice Project. For those of you who don't know us so well, clients choose us when they want expert help to get actionable insights and avoid risk when surveying staff and clients. We have insight-rich surveys, including engagements, pulse, onboarding, exit 360, service quality, diversity, and a range of other special purpose and industry-specific surveys. One of our key differentiators is our market-leading expert service. We know surveys better and provide a higher level of service than our competitors. In our most recent survey of our own clients, we scored 100% satisfaction and a net promoter score of 78, which is world-class. We have user-friendly tech that empowers you to drill deep into your stats and text responses, look for high-level themes and priorities, and control who sees what results. We have strong industry benchmarks so you can understand how you're travelling compared to other organisations. And finally, we offer a lower total cost for your surveys. When you factor in subscriptions, consulting services you may need, and the cost and risk of you trying to do it all yourself, we're often your lowest cost option. If you're not aware of our backgrounds, we grew out of a research program at Macquarie University. And since 2002, we've given a voice to almost 4 million people across more than 3,000 surveying projects. We're here today because HammondCare is a winner of our Change Champion Awards. We have 2 awards at Voice Project. Our Best Workplace Award, which recognises high-performing clients, and our Change Champion Award, which recognises clients who have improved the most. On this slide, we recognise all the winners of our 2021 Change Champion Awards. Unfortunately, there's too many here to name individually, but you can go to our website to learn more about our awards or read some inspiring case studies that we've written on their change journeys. At this point, I'll hand over to Dr. Louise Parkes, who is a Principal Consultant at Voice Project, who will introduce our speaker, Mike Baird. Over to you, Lou.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's webinar, Mike Baird, CEO of HammondCare. Many of you know that I am familiar with HammondCare, having previously served on the board there for a number of years, including seeing Mike appointed as CEO in 2020. I did not have anything to do with them winning the Change Challenge Award. That is completely down to their staff voice survey results from last year. But it does mean that Mike is used to me throwing curly questions at him. So I'm looking forward to you all helping me do that a little later on this morning. HammondCare is an independent Christian charity with more than 4,500 employees. They provide aged care and health services, particularly for people with dementia, and palliative care for those approaching end of life. Mike Baird was appointed CEO in 2020, just in time for the Royal Commission findings into aged care, significant regulatory changes in quality standards and accreditation, and in the midst of a COVID pandemic. I'm not sure if they helped prepare him for these challenges, but prior to HammondCare, Mike was on the executive of National Australia Bank, and before that was the Premier of New South Wales. Mike is not entirely new to the not-for-profit sector. He is passionate about looking after our community's most vulnerable. He's an ambassador for Bear Cottage and Southern Youth Family Services. He also sits on the boards of Surfing New South Wales and Cricket Australia. And I believe, Mike, you're in the process of switching chair hats from the Australian Business Growth Fund to chair the Future Generation Australia, which supports charities for children and young people at risk. Mike, you are clearly a very busy man, so we really appreciate you joining us today to talk about how you and the team at HammondCare have supported and led the organisation through the challenges of the last few years. For those watching and listening, please submit any questions that you have through that Q&A function, or vote them up so you get the questions that you want at the top, and we'll put them to Mike at the end of the presentation. So over to you now, Mike.
Well, Louise, thank you for the kind introduction and your stewardship over many years on the board and the work here. It's a sad loss that you've stepped off, but you made a great contribution when you're here. And Peter, I also want to start by thanking you for the introduction and your acknowledgement of the country. It's incredibly important. We're in different parts of the country, but all of us acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So as I talk to this, there's a couple of caveats I do want to put in, and that is I certainly don't have all the answers. HammondCare doesn't have all the answers. There's significant challenges we're currently facing. The last 6 to 8 months is on top of the part of this period that I talk about. So that has changed again, some of the responses and actions needed and some of the pressures. And I know that anyone that's listening, the last 12, 18 months have been incredibly challenging on a personal level and wherever you are professionally. On both of those, it's been an unbelievably tough time. So we'll certainly have some insights and reflections, but I don't pretend to be the oracle. And hopefully in the discussion at the end with the questions, we can kind of work through other things or issues that are important to you. That's really the main sort of caveat I want to give, and also just to thank everyone for coming along and participating. For me, it is a privilege, and I'll give you a quick context of HammondCare and who they are, but certainly I appreciated Louise's introduction. For those who don't know, yes, there's residential care, and I think, Peter, we can flick the slides on this. There's residential care, there's hospitals, and you can see close to 34,000 people cared for, and home care. But we also have dementia consultants across the country that sort of engage across various residential facilities. So in many different ways, significant number of people that are cared for on an annual basis, getting up towards 100 locations across Australia. Many supporters of our foundation, volunteers who are incredibly important. They have re-engaged sort of post the pandemic period, significant, almost 5,000 staff, and social dividend. We kind of report that annually, understanding that's not just necessarily the bottom line. Obviously, the bottom line is reasonably marginal as a not-for-profit, but the actions we take significantly invest into those who need it most. The overall mission is the reason I'm here, and that is improving the quality of life for people in need. And I'll talk about that in a little detail in a second. But I do count it a privilege. And I don't know how everyone feels about the organisation they work with. For me, to get out every day to come and support and try and improve the quality of life for people in need, and to help our staff and team that are doing that in the front line, is nothing short of a privilege. I find it an absolutely incredible privilege to do. But to give you a context of the 12-month period, it has been all types of things when you start as a CEO and what you may or may not want to do. But the first thing you have to do is deal with what's right in front of you. And this was it. Aged care amongst a global pandemic is challenging. Well, aged care is challenging. Thrown a global pandemic, it's incredibly challenging. And you can see some of the headlines that roll through. It was a tough period, unsustainable funding, challenges before the vaccination, trying to keep everyone as safe as possible. Distressing is a good word because, I spoke to many people personally who were not going into supermarkets because they were sort of working in aged care facilities. They didn't see friends. They were terrified that they were the ones who were going to bring in COVID. So, all of that makes an impact. And then some of the outcomes, I mean, the significant numbers of deaths, the tragedy around that, residents being confined to a room, visitors being excluded, staff standing down, trying to bring in workforce if they were available. And, certainly the last 6 to 8 months, there's almost been none available. And an increased level of depression for residents. Now, I think in time, that depression is shifting to the staff and the organisations that have cared. I think that's a longer term thing that we all need to deal with. And we've started thinking about that as a leadership team. But, that context is incredibly tough. So we responded to that across a range of measures, and I'm happy to go into details on those later. But really important, we had a centralised team that managed all the information. When you're in the midst of something like that, you need a single source of truth, and it needs to be clear, it needs to be regular, it needs to be factual, it needs to be science-based, and we set that up significantly. We also used the experts, so a clinical governance committee that guided each response, various parts of the business, looking after our residents and patients and clients, and decisions were made and communicated back through the pandemic team. But that was critical. And then communicating the team. I often would interview, our sort of chief medical officer, our Dr. Cole, as he is formerly known, is someone that kind of brings great wisdom and expertise. And as we were going through the challenges, he talked through the way the waves would work and practical things that you could do, the importance of vaccinations, all of those things, just factually, openly, transparently engaging. I think that really helped. And that honest and regular communication, just acknowledging that actually this is really tough. And this spike, we don't know where it's going to end. We've got forecasts, but just trying to be honest about it. I think that really gave confidence in the direction and the steps that we were taking. And also telling stories, really important that we spoke about how care was still being delivered and how our staff were going above and beyond. And, we did that quite purposely. And I think that was really helpful. And head office to the front line, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but really important that we heard firsthand and saw firsthand, what was happening. Very nice for a leadership team or a head office environment to sit comfortably behind their desks and chairs in an office. But the truth is, let's get out and see and hear. And we certainly did that across a range of levels. So I'm sure people have had other responses, but those sort of key elements, I think, kind of helped deal with what was before us. But then the question becomes, as a new CEO, what, is now the time, to take actions. And certainly, I think despite those circumstances and whatever challenges you're facing, you've still got to point to the future, always. And I think the point of the future provides hope to organisations, provides hopes to employees, and direction, because you're dealing with the crisis now, but, the crisis will come, the crisis will pass, and then where is the organisation? And there are opportunities in the midst of that for the organisation. So we ran a strategy process concurrent with the pandemic, and I have to say it was incredibly well received. We went across the organisation, everyone was offered the opportunity to participate. We had probably about 35% response rate, an incredible response rate across the whole organisation, participating in a strategy piece. And then obviously smaller groups of leaders, the top leadership group and then the broader leadership group, kind of engage across various elements. Now, interestingly, as we did it, the mission remained unchanged, a very important part, and I've never seen it before where it's lived and breathed to the extent it is here. So there was no need to change that. That's the mission, improving the quality of life of people in need. The question is, what's the next chapter? Where do we take that mission and how do we take it forward? The ambition was where it was new. We wanted to set the global standard for relationship-based care, aspirational. We don't just want to try and do the best we possibly can sort of here in Australia. What is there things happening across the world that we can import and use? How do we drive that? And, relationship-based care can mean different things, but it's the holistic care. Every single part of the person. The person is at the front. It is at the centre. Emotional, physical, mental, design features. How do we ensure that we are giving the best possible care in partnering with families and doing that very purposely? I've spoken here about a resident who I saw sort of taking branches off a tree in their back garden at a cottage, and I was questioning that. I said, what's that? And they said, well, look, all the other residents are fine. You know, no one complains about that, and he's very happy doing it. So we then did it. I thought, well, that is relationship-based care. Wow, you're not really caring about the garden, which most people say, please leave it as it is. But then he found his story, and his story was that they said it's even more powerful because he grew up in an orphanage in Italy. And when he was in that orphanage, he was the eldest boy, and he used to break out at night because they never got enough food. And he used to go around to vineyards and fruit trees and bring fruits and vines and things back to the residents. And they think that's what he was doing. So, you know, understanding the person, who they are, and giving the best emotional, clinical, physical, holistic support. So we want to do that the best we possibly can. The second part was the ambition was to increase our care for those that others won't or can't. Now that is both those in remote locations. We go to places in home care where people will not go. It's not economic to go, but there's great need. North of Menindee Lakes, which is north of Broken Hill, one example. But we also take people who are living with dementia in really tough circumstances that others won't take, we take. So we've kind of set ourselves goals on that ambition, you know, and make sure that as we're spending our social dividend, how are we looking after and living that ambition of increasing our care for those that others won't or can't. Now that ambition is new, and that's what we've set sort of during this pandemic period, but then it was also where we focus. And part of that is where do we have sort of leadership positions? How can we help not just those we're caring for, potentially the sector more broadly? And the two areas that we came down on was complex dementia, which is there's a long history. The first dementia cottage was established in 1995 here, which is obviously the Royal Commission recommended is the form that we should use. So part of the research and design and history of HammondCare was put into how best to design that. So you can't just rest on your laurels. You need to keep going, investing. And so that complex dementia is a key part. The second part was the palliative care. And we've got particularly through our hospitals and into our community care, significant palliative care expertise. So how can we embed that across HammondCare, but more broadly play a leadership role in that? And home care, for those on the call are familiar, is kind of exploding. So how do we basically set ourselves up for scale? So they're the areas we focus. And then how we impact. And this is where we start to go around. And things like operational excellence, we separated from existing operations, startups. You know, so when we're starting new facilities or services, we don't want that to distract existing. So I think that certainly helped. We're using things like data. There are dashboards that are coming from residential care into home care, into all leadership teams, ultimately up to the board in terms of the performance. You're looking at the data, trying to be predictive rather than reactive in terms of some of the challenges. And, you know, we're seeing that kind of at the moment. But I did want to double down and how we measure as well. We make sure, I won't talk about that now, but there are tangible metrics across how we measure, are we progressing or not? But I think that you cannot achieve a strategy. You cannot respond to the pandemic without your people. And really that's where the first key focus was, doubling down on our people. And how do you do that? Well, as an incoming CEO, in the lead up, I spent a couple of days reading through every piece of the voice survey, including every single comment that came in from staff members. And that was sobering, but incredibly helpful and informative. And I think that you need to really feel it as a leader. You know, you really need to feel it. It can't be just look at the numbers and the percentages. You get into the comments and you can hear the frustration, you can hear the pleas for help. And I think that's what really drives. So here are the 5 things that sort of came up. You know, there was a deep disconnect, appeared to be in the organisation between the leadership and the front line. They didn't feel that there was an understanding or that it was visible enough, and that was a key part. People didn't feel valued or recognised. That, again, probably linked a bit to the first, but standalone, a very significant feature. If your employees and staff do not feel valued, well, it's very hard to implement or execute any strategy or the best possible care, would be my thing. There was a lack of a future direction or vision. So they just didn't know where we were going next and how we would achieve what we were hopefully going to try to. There was that. Then there was an organisation that was in silos, and they're very different parts of their business. But, I've been in many organisations, many places where silos are evident, and it's never effective. You can always be much more effective if you kind of work as one. And then limited career paths and training opportunities for staff. They were really the key features. So we went to work, and this was a key part of the first implementation of the strategy. So the disconnect, and look, I'm sure many would share practical things that you would do here, but these appeared to work in response. The CEO, that'd be me, actually. So I, together with the leadership team, went out on buddy shifts, and I learned more on my first buddy shift than I had read in the first 6 months. It was incredible. I saw it was a nurse, Louise, and she had been with us for over 10 years, and her care of patients and staff, but also the demands. I mean, I was exhausted. I mean, we stopped for a dinner break, and I said, Louise, we don't have time. But I came back with a list of things that we needed to enact. But, that was just appreciated with the staff that you actually take the time to do that. And my whole leadership team, recently they did a number of night shifts, and just to see, to hear, to feel, what is it our staff are doing, and how do we bring that back? And importantly, how can we help them? What is it we can do to make their lives easier so they can improve the care that we're providing? We reinstated. They used to have this established, but COVID stopped it, and we kind of pushed through and did it virtually, maybe, and some physically when we could in and out. But reward and recognition. Reward being those that are living the mission and action awards nominated by employees, but also recognition for service. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And in many organisations, I've seen this done incredibly poorly. And if you've put 5 years of your life, that's significant. 10, 15, 20, think of it all. And I just want as organisations to stand and thank someone that does that. So we're prioritising that, and I think that was appreciated. And those events, we're doing it twice a year. I've just come to the end of it. I've got one more to do on Friday. But, 32 events over a 2-week period, the leadership team out. And it doesn't take much. I mean, the team on the ground to see the leadership team there, their peers being recognised and valued, I think that was quite transformational and really had a big impact. In terms of the direction, well, I've already gone through the strategy. And I think, providing that hope and direction in the midst of the many chaos has really guided, I think, the organisation in a way that was unexpected to me, because I thought it was going to be much tougher given what we were facing. But there was a hunger, to know where we were going and what my role, as in every single member of HammondCare's role is, and trying to connect that personally was a big part of that. I think the workplace, for those that various ways of communicating staff, we used to do it through an intranet style. And I think the most we ever got was kind of up to 100 people that would read an intranet article. We brought in workplace, and there's now about 2,500 staff that are active on it. But importantly, you can sort of share stories. So I would have share the mic. I'm not that creative, but there you go. And I would just do interviews with various people, care workers, leaders, maintenance team, health workers, palliative care nurses, like a whole range of the organisation. And it starts to become alive. The organisation comes to life through the stories and what people are doing. And there's some amazing ones. Our librarian is here because, her father was cared for in very challenging circumstances, changed her life. She came to work for HammondCare. And that's a story that should be known, powerfully told, beautifully told. And, just one example where you can be proud of what's going on at HammondCare, even though it's not your day-to-day, and you become much more connected. This concept of delivering a one HammondCare, really positive. Investing in leadership, and I'll talk about that as we close in a few minutes, but certainly established a leadership team, an infusion of existing expertise and history and capability with new talents and expertise that were needed as you kind of built for scale, and spend time bringing that together, real priority. And then the next roll out in terms of the group under the leadership team as well. We put in a Cert 3 program for care workers, and that just provided a career opportunity and broadened scholarship programs. But the honest appraisal, the career pathways and training remains much more to do. And that's something we have for next year. So I think that gives you a sense of the opportunity. In terms of the results, I think, Peter, the results, so the numbers were significant jumps. The leadership team, the direction, the progress, the vision, all of that was positive. And the overall engagement score is kind of going up, notwithstanding where we were with the pandemic, which is that initial context I told was incredibly pleasing. I just think there's direction. But, I put those results up knowing that the last 6 to 8 months, well, they've doubled down again. And, really hard to feel positive about the last 6 to 8 months was that I remember being out in one of our facilities in the middle of January in full PPE, next to a staff member that had just done 3 double shifts in a row. She was exhausted. On my right was another care worker that had done a triple shift. And, he had 2 days off after it, which is, what he was about, like how on earth we've got through and they've got through. It's really hard. I mean, I'm in awe of what they've done, but it's been the toughest 6 to 9 months I think that they could have faced. So, the results, that they will undoubtedly fluctuate, but at the core, I think that where we set in terms of the direction, the engagement and the action on what our staff was saying, has led to some sort of good results, which has been positive. So the last point is just my reflections. And look, there's many things, about that process that I could spend a lot of time on, but these were kind of as I thought about it. I think wherever you are in leadership, you've got to have a vision. You've got to have the dartboard on the wall, which I think, to give my age away, I grew up with Jack Welch, who was kind of a renowned corporate leader, maybe not necessarily the integrity or values or the EQ that you would see today. But what stands true is just a vision. And, where is it? You've got your mission, your purpose. Where are we taking that? And then importantly, what is my role in that? And I think that's the role of the CEO and a leadership team, connecting, to that. It's great to have a vision, but if your team and staff don't feel connected and don't have a role in it, well, then how do we deliver it? And I think that every single one at HammondCare has got a role in trying to get the best possible relationship-based care. That's something that's critical. And to help us with leading in complex dementia, what training are we doing? What research do we need? Palliative care, same thing. In our hospitals, it's a key part of what we deliver. All of that, there is a personal role for everyone, and it's making sure that our leaders join those dots. Speaking plainly and honestly, and I mean, this is the team's reflection back to me on this is that the communication is kind of informal, it's kind of open, warmish, but, you can't be who you're not. My point on this is just be as simple and clear and transparent and as authentic as you can be. When we're in the midst of that pandemic and it was incredibly dark and challenging, it's no point pretending that everything is rosy. It wasn't, and it was hard. And you've got to be vulnerable. And I shared on personal things that I felt, kind of overwhelmed, but in control, this is hard. This is really hard. And I'm finding it personally really hard. I think it's an honest dialogue, like you're talking with your friends, like you're talking with your family. You don't all of a sudden have to get this kind of rigid corporate ease, that kind of rolls through with kind of formal structures and words and sentences. Just be yourself. And I think that authentic leadership is what people respond to. And that communication, have fun. It's okay to have fun and to laugh at yourself as well. Invest in your leadership team. I think that's a given, wherever you are. But it's also ensuring alignment. So with new teams and teams that have got new people, actually investing and building that trust. We've been through the Lencioni process. For those that know that, I find that a really useful sort of tool. But in simple terms, if you've got trust and vulnerability and openness and alignment on where you're going, you certainly have a capacity, to drive an organisation. But you also need to invest in leadership, and we hadn't done that as much in the past few years. You need not just at the top team, but you need to create the future leaders of the organisation. I think that's a critical part. The second last is acting on feedback. Now, that's if people are taking the time to do a voice survey or reaching out with an email or correspondence, you have to act. Now, you're not going to respond on everything, but if you're not responding, say why you're not responding. And if you are listening and respond, well, communicate as such. And I think that culture is going to create a much healthier environment where the staff feel that if they raise concerns, they're being listened to and they're seeing it in the actions that come. Now, that's not always going to happen, but I think that really has to be a driver. No point going to this effort unless you're going to respond. And I've heard that in many criticisms in many places where we put these in, nothing ever happens. What's the point? If it's we put this in and we've had action, well, that's powerful. And you collectively kind of move forward would be the thing. And the last point is just being visible. I said that up front. You can't just be distant and kind of read reports on your services and facilities and operations. You need to roll your sleeves up and get there. And I think it's appreciated by the team, but also very, very instructive and informative. As I said, that being visible is great. The team need to see you there, but I learn so much for each and every sort of shift I've done, whether it be in home care or in pharmacies, in our hospitals, in residential care. It is an incredible experience to see and feel and hear, and certainly to encourage your leaders to do that. I think being visible is critical. So that's really some reflections, Peter and Louise. So we'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was fantastic. And your very last point there about the visibility resonates with me. I actually just read a research paper very recently where they've created a measure looking at how attentive leaders are when they're present with staff. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's not just being visible, but it's you being attentive and listening and learning. So that's fantastic. It's lovely to see we've got some questions coming through. So if you're ready, I will go through some of those now. Obviously, we titled this webinar Above and Beyond, and that's definitely come through in your presentation in terms of the extent to which staff have gone above and beyond and your leadership team has gone above and beyond. But this question is really about sustainability of that level of effort. Have you noticed signs of burnout or effects on the mental health being felt by frontliners or by your leadership team, and how are you responding or managing that?
Yeah, no, very, very much, Louise. And look, I feel really concerned about this. And I think that, we've seen not just our care workers, attrition rates have kind of spiked. And, that's a whole range of, but those circumstances they've been through is so tough, personally, professionally, that people just need a break. And, we're working on how we drive resilience programs. We've put on kind of some wellbeing sort of coordinators that are directly and solely connected into supporting our staff. We've got people that provide pastoral care to residents, also to our staff, but we're really trying to up our support directly for the staff and personally connecting and putting forums and processes around that. But I think as I look at it now, we have to definitely be in a position that all leaders are role modelling sustainability. So, like across my leadership team, they're exhausted from one side to the other, and they need to prioritise leave. And there's pressures in terms of the frontline services, but we have to bring leave into our day-to-day. And not only that, but what practices can we connect ourselves into? I mean, I talk regularly about we need to be connected into those we love and what we love, you know, in that context. So we certainly have to sort of drive that personally, you know, so prioritise what it is that you love doing outside of work. That has to be part of every week. Those you love have to be part of every week. And then when you are feeling metal on metal, you've got to role model that leave. And certainly that's what we'll be focusing on in the next period, because there is deep exhaustion, you know, from one end of the organisation. And it's okay to admit that, acknowledge that. You've got to call it out. But I think that the leader's role modelling is where you can roll it into the organisation. So that's probably our main focus from here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And that really speaks to those leaders having being educated and have a good awareness of what it takes to have good well-being and being well at work, so that they can model that and encourage those kind of activities with staff. We've got a couple of questions here coming up about leadership. So I'm just going to double barrel a couple of here. So particularly, what leadership development initiatives are driving the ethos of the leadership team? So what are you doing to develop them and have them aligned with the ethos? And the second question is about the buddy shifts that you talked about, because often managers are asked to do that, but it doesn't happen. Did you experience any resistance in response to that idea? And if so, how did you respond?
So hang on. That's two questions. So what was the first again? Just remind me the first.
Are there any development initiatives that you're driving?
Yeah. So in terms of my team, it's twofold. I mean, it's very purposefully building relationships among various members of the team, and it can't be functional. It has to be sort of personal. We're practicing relationship-based care, or you know, what's relationship-based leadership look like, and how do we build that personal connection with each other beyond just admiring expertise and happy to go to meetings and look at the contributions. You know, what is it about them that makes them tick? You know, who are they? What are their passions? What are their interests? You know, how can we support them in that and provide just life support alongside leadership team support? So in that context, creating space for that and prioritising that, you know, is important. You know, it's not, if you're going to develop that, it can't just be tokenistic. You need to take, you know, a day or 2 days or periods where you just the day-to-day has to be put aside while you prioritise that. And certainly that involves being vulnerable. You know, we've had sort of great moments with the team where people have said some pretty incredibly personal things, but that's just kind of built the trust. You know, vulnerability does build that trust among each other, and you know, so that building that relationship base. And then the second is just the alignment. You know, so that strategy process was incredibly important. So where is it we collectively going to go, and everyone having a voice in that and having ownership of that. Because if you don't have, you know, it's very easy, you know, new CEO or, you know, a CFO or like the head of strategy says, oh, this is where we're going and get on with it. You build time, and that takes time, you know, and you do it properly with an open mind on where we go and how we incorporate that thinking. And not everyone's going to agree, but that process itself melds that alignment. I think that's really key. And then you look for external opportunities is the last point I'd make. So mentors, I've got some mentors that are kind of connected into my team. I've found them helpful on the journey. And then there's kind of professional opportunities you look for as well. So you kind of build the capability that way, but if you build the relationship and then the alignment, I think that's the key to success. And then the second point, any resistance from the team about doing the buddy shifts, was that the kind of context? And look, no, there wasn't resistance. You know, it's just, and many had done it at times in different ways, but you know, probably the change is it's just purposeful. It's part of our operating rhythm. And people, you know, in January and February, everyone was out in various places. But more importantly, just knowing that we're going to go out to the front line and we're going to bring back an understanding and perspectives. And there's not one person who did it in terms of how do you get the buy-in, who didn't come back inspired, or have a list of things that we had to do and to help make a difference. So I think the act itself is what actually brings the buy-in, because it's incredibly helpful and beneficial and wonderful, to see a team. So, no real resistance, but, making it purposeful, it's just great in terms of the benefit that's come to everyone.
Yeah, fabulous. You talked about the strategy development and the collaboration involved in there. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Who led it? Who was involved? And particularly, how does the understanding of it show up at the front line? So how do you see that it's actually people are getting it at the front line?
Yeah, look, I think it's important, if possible, to have some independent thinking to work alongside a leadership team. And, there are many organisations that are versed in strategy. Before I started at HammondCare, I interviewed 6 of them. And what I was looking for first and foremost was a real alignment with what we do. I mean, they all had capability. They had all could have done the job. But there was one that stood out in terms of the way they connected into our mission. To them, this wasn't just an assignment. It was a chance to make a difference, to an organisation in a sector that desperately needed help in terms of, aged care. And, they were determined to try and help our thinking. And so running a comprehensive process, starting with the whole organisation, the whole range of questions, but getting a methodology around the questions and directions. And that external voice helped create that methodology and direction. But there was always, at every point in turn, owned by the leadership team. This was never, that they were there to guide, to interpret data, to present data, and then that information base at the leadership team and then the board level was to reflect on that and to make the decisions. In terms of driving that to the front line, well, it did start at the beginning. It's been continued, obviously, through the practices. But, I would honestly say that still has, a way to go. The last 6 to 12 months have been so consuming, so challenging, that just delivering, the best possible dementia care and sort of home care, which obviously covers dementia care and others, and hospital care has been so all-consuming. That has been difficult, but everyone has had the chance to engage and deliver it. I think if you go back to what were some of our data points, the staff calling out for training, how can we can't deliver the strategy unless we have the best people who are highly valued, best people needs training. So that is being invested in. And, people are seeing additional training coming, that's dementia training, palliative care training, TAFE opportunities, together with leadership training. So I think people are seeing it operationally. We've taken, from the existing operations team, new services to free them up, to get them to focus on it and to develop best practice from one end to the other. So certainly they're seeing, the results of the strategy. But, it's a 5-year strategy, so it's going to take time.
Thank you. Mike, you talked about the rewards and recognition and the work that's gone into that. John's asked, with the limited funding being a not-for-profit that many of our other clients share as well, what sort of rewards actually could you offer, or recognition could you offer?
Well, this is the thing, Lloyd. There is a small gift voucher that's provided, but it's a couple of $100, and I can tell you that's appreciated. But what's appreciated is just standing in front of your peers and sort of leaders taking the time to acknowledge the service. You've been here 10 years, 15 years, and there's a heartfelt round of applause, and then there's whether, depending on COVID status, either ticking things on screen, or elbowing, or fist bumping, and even, who knows, in the future we could be hugging again. be amazing. But that's standing in front of an organisation. That's the way I try to portray it, that when someone is there, the whole of HammondCare is saying thank you for that 10 years. And if they're not at the service or they're not part of it, trying to go out of their way to send a message to them, that doesn't cost anything. And I think that's just that simple act of stopping and thanking and recognising. And it's an investment of the leadership team. I mean, that 2 weeks is a big period where everyone is out and about, but is that really? I mean, we have a chance to get out to our services and all parts of the business to see it in action and to connect in with the leaders and to see those that have gone above and beyond and to recognise service. I mean, it's a invigorating, instructive process. So I think it's, that in itself, I think has driven it, and I think the small financial contribution kind of helps, but I think it's the other that is given far more weight.
Absolutely. And that's certainly what we see in our research. And for all our clients who get the priority matrix will know that recognition is way out there in front of the actual remuneration in terms of rewards. Mike, as you've mentioned, the last 6 to 9 months, the staff shortages have become quite critical. I mean, workforce has always been an issue for aged care, but that has come into very sharp focus recently. Marie's asking, at a sector level, what hope do you see to address the staff shortages? And I guess we'd also like to know, how has HammondCare responded? What are you doing at HammondCare to attract and keep the staff that you have?
We're starting the last bit first. I mean, we've kind of redone our employee value proposition, and again, part of that's come through the survey. We've introduced things like fitness passport, more broadly. So you get sort of discounted gym membership for those that are interested in that. And interestingly, there's been a big take up in that, and people appreciate that. So I mean, that's the benefit of working in a large organisation. So it's what brings us together is that we care is in essence, and people matter. Every person matters. People matter. So various derivations of that we have connected in terms of a new employee value proposition. So it's why we're here, got the mission. We want to live and breathe that people do matter. And that starts with you. And we've doubled down with the initial process as people come in. I mean, we were losing people early, taking ownership of, emails and correspondence with leaders and managers, checking in, for that first week, 2, 3, 4, has undoubtedly had an impact in terms of attrition levels. And we're seeing that kind of turn around at the moment. But, that's not enough. And at the higher level, I think, I've spoken about immigration playing a role. I mean, that's undoubtedly had an impact in terms of the sector. And I certainly think that the care workers should be prioritised in terms of when they sort of get back into full stream immigration. They should be one of the prioritised sector that are given opportunities. I think that potentially helps. But probably the biggest is the reset that comes with the wages. And I think organisationally, but more importantly, sector-wide, that's what we need to partner with government should the wages increase come, that we hope it is. And it's complete injustice, where they are at the moment. I mean, to have someone who can be giving sort of care in a home or in a residential facility earning significantly less than sort of local cafes or Bunnings stores or NDIS workers. I mean, there's all types of work, significantly more than what our care workers are given. So my hope is the Fair Work Commission provides that. But that's not, that's a boost. So there's a boost in wage coming, but there's a chance to reset the discussion and the dialogue. And that is, aged care work is incredible. It is purpose-filled. It is life-changing. And you have an opportunity to do that day in, day out, and to have the stories. And some of our care workers will tell stories that will bring tears to your eyes, but it comes to this incredible beating heart, wanting to make a difference to people. And what we've had is just the bad stories on aged care, people putting everything against it. And there's been terrible stories, but there are so many that do such great work, and it's such defining that I think we need to reset it. And to me, that wage period is an opportunity with government through advertising, through recruitment support, retelling stories of what a great sector. And I think that could be the game changer. You know, that'd be, well, that's my dream anyway.
Yep, it's pretty challenging and it's huge, but thank you. I've got a slightly related but slightly different angle here from Blake, who asks, do you see a need for other organisations or government to better enable their workforce with caring responsibilities to be involved in the care of elderly or people with a disability? So, for example, through better carers leave policies. If you could influence business leaders on this topic, what would you say? What impact or outcomes would you hope to achieve?
You know, who was that, Blake? That's a really good idea. I mean, I think you know, one thing we did during the pandemic was partnering in care, and you know, we took additional risk in terms of those we let in, but we had an opportunity by taking family members through infection control and everything you could do personally, you know, to minimise the chance of catching COVID and to manage infection control coming onto premises and with your loved one. That enabled many to come in. And, you know, if family members are in, you've got an opportunity to build that social importance of the relationship. I mean, it's such a critical part of the care. We partner with the families in terms of living the care, so having them there. But having more time, you know, with residents or, you know, those at home or the disability sector, I think that's a fabulous thing. And you know, people having time off, you know, organisations who want to make a difference to some of the most needy in society, well, that would be a great sort of call to arms for any corporate CEO to say, you know, there's all types of leaves and important leaves, but ultimately, you know, having additional time for caring, because the personal impact when you've got someone who needs care is devastational. You know, it's hard to be as effective and productive as an employee if you're constantly worried about someone you loved and the care they're providing. If you've got more time to play a role in that, which is going to help others in providing that care, that's powerful. So I think that's, you know, Blake should start a campaign. We should talk to our politicians. Well, our corporate leaders, actually. We probably don't need to comment. I think there's something in that, and I really like it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Mike, this is a bit more of a, I guess, a personal reflection question. We've been involved in the not-for-profit sector for a long time, and a constant feedback from people in the sector is that there is a bit of a perception that the sector is not seen as professional or as challenging as a corporate environment. How have you found working in the sector, and has there been anything surprising or contrary to your expectations in shifting there? Yeah,
I'd say those initial two things were wrong and wrong. So, I mean, yes. I mean, in terms of the not-for-profit, you're not going to have, you know, the scale or necessarily the sophistications of systems, you know, or IT that you necessarily would in a corporate sector. But in terms of the capability of people, I mean, I've met people that work here that are unbelievable. And, you know, I kind of think of my leadership team, all different skills, and the broader team. I got the top 100 leaders together a couple of months ago. There are so many different capable people there. And I would say, yes, there are talented people in corporates, but I say, I see you and have a look at this group. I think there is every ounce of talent that sits there. Some haven't had the time of kind of running corporate P&Ls and, you know, transformation projects and things that come into corporate sectors. But I tell you, if they went through, you know, how do you implement a regulator's ask into the right policies and procedures to deliver the best possible care, taking care of clinical, personal, physical, well, they could run rings around you. So I certainly think the NFB undersells itself in terms of capability and the challenges. I mean, I've had a whole range of roles I think in the last 2 years, I've probably been challenged as much as some other roles, which you might think had off-the-chart requirements and challenges. Well, I did, but so does here, and also the opportunities. And I think that's one of the great things. I mean, I each morning, I will often sort of get up and charge it, because if we can make a difference, to our team in delivering care to many people in need, well, that's a day well spent, and if I'm working with incredibly capable people who we're growing and jointly aligned, to that mission, well, that's kind of an intoxicating combination. And so I think the people, and I think you're seeing more people kind of come in with different, traditionally corporate backgrounds come in because they're looking for the purpose. So I would say the NFP is the new black.
Oh, thank you, Mike. It's very clear that that your passion and HammondCare's mission have made a very wonderful marriage in a way, and it's really exciting. And I guess it's not surprising that we've seen that that uplift and that response from staff in terms of the things that they've seen change and progress, even in the midst of all of those challenges. We're coming to the end of our hour. So I'm sorry for all of those of you who have put questions through. We won't have time for more of them now. But I want to say thank you.
So what do we do with that, Louise? I feel bad that we haven't answered the questions.
Some of them are anonymous, so it'll be hard to respond, but we have got a Q&A record, so we'll have a look at perhaps following up and putting some written responses up even, when we put the recording up and things like that. So we'll try and respond to the questions that have come through. So thank you so much.
Yeah, if anyone wants to, Louise, and it's possible, I'm happy to follow up. But no, thank you for the opportunity, and Peter, it's been a privilege, and I hope that it's in some way helpful. And I know there's many people out there that are facing all types of challenges and circumstances in your organisations, and generally all the best, because it's been a tough period. Hopefully there's some thoughts that have been helpful, but I'm sure likewise I could learn from you and some of your challenges. So thank you for the opportunity, Louise.
Thanks, Mike. We really appreciate your generosity.